Hello, this is Arthur Braitman. It's March 21st, 2018, and I'm giving a brief Tezos dev update. I've been traveling for the past few weeks, and so it's been a couple of weeks since the last one. So a few things to report on. So on the one hand, we have some randomization work on the locators. So when you connect a node to the network, your peers are going to tell you, "Hey, I know this better chain that you should look at." They don't give you the entire set of headers. What they do is they give you the most recent headers, and then they give you more and more jumps uh, with larger and larger gaps, so that you can find at which point they might diverge from your chain. And the way we were doing it was that if you had two peers know a better chain and you would connect to them, they would give you the same locators, like in the jumps would have the same size on the blockchain. And so now it's randomized based on your ID and your and the peer's ID, which helps it make it more parallel. So when you're bootstrapping the network and you're connecting to many more nodes, it should be much faster now to download this chain because you're getting different values from different people. Work on error categorization. So in the protocol, we have temporary errors and we have permanent errors. So permanent errors, we just reject outright. Temporary errors, sometimes we try to keep an operation in a pool so that if in a later block it can become valid, then we can apply it. And so in this case, there's now a limit on the size of the pool to avoid the pool being flooded with operations which might be valid in the future, but actually never end up being valid. So it's a spam prevention mechanism. Um, and we'll work on peer blacklist, banning peers. We're also starting some work on adding explicit whitelist for peers, where you say, not only do I always want to connect to those nodes, but I only want to connect to those nodes. And it's something that can be useful for people building bakers, because if you have a baker, what you typically want to do is have several nodes connect to the peer-to-peer network, and then a single node that connects to those nodes, and that can give you a consistent state of the blockchain. There's several bakers who've done this design, and it's probably a best practice. And so that should make it easier to do. You could already do it with IP table rules. Now it should become supported at the client level. I mentioned in my last update that we started adding RPCs in order to query the internal state of the ledger deeper than the existing one wares, because you could just get anything that's stored in a context. And so now the same thing but typed, so that you can get more precise and more useful information. You can get JSON schema when you're querying a certain type of data. And also, so when we started, we had the libsodium library for all of our cryptographic primitives. And so now we moved away from that. We used Tweet NACL, a Blake2B, custom Blake2B library, and a few others. But there's just one step. So move one step after that is going to try to do some integration with a library for this crypto primitive, which is written in F star. So these are formally verified libraries, and they play nicely with they play very nicely with the camel, and so it will be great to be able to add those. And the project is called HACL. So more work on adding documentation about the errors on the RPCs. And so as people have, I've noticed work on the redemption mechanism for the Genesis block. So we have a mechanism in the Genesis block where you can check the balances of the block. But if you want to activate the key, you need to use it. You need to use a redemption code. And the benefit of that is if you have something like a beta with an opt-in period and you want to let people opt in explicitly, that lets you do that. One other thing is, so there's a peculiarity in the Tezos protocol that it always launches with what is called a Genesis protocol, and the Genesis protocol does nothing. The only thing it does is that it activates the first protocol. We call it alpha, which is confusing because it's an AlphaNet, and that's not what it is. We're still trying to decide on how we want to call it. List of sauces has been proposed, so maybe aioli. Anyways, instead of putting a lot of parameters inside of the first protocol, the idea would be to move those parameters inside the first block of this protocol. So essentially, you'd have first a block from the Genesis protocol, which then calls in a bigger block with a lot of parameters, so such as list of what is called sometimes the Genesis block, but it wouldn't be from the Genesis protocol, that parameterizes the next protocol, and then that protocol can use that. It's a little cleaner way of doing things. There's work also on new bindings. So we're currently using LevelDB, and we're now working on bindings for LMDB, which has better performance. Some folks noticed that they had bottlenecks in LevelDB. It's also a C library, which makes it play nicer in terms of bindings with a camel. Ultimately, we'll have to that can after the network is live, but ultimately, I think work to replace this with just file was just like memory based storage, just like a file layout where we like directly control where we're storing things rather than use a ready-made key-based value store will probably be helpful. Lots of work on testing, including randomness to test to try to cover many scenarios. Um, so there's also been a new effort to systematize the tests that we're doing. So instead of just saying like I'm going to test this, I'm going to test that, it's an effort that started from the documentation of the proof of stake, and then say, okay, let's take it line by line and make sure that there's a test that covers everything that's in this proof of stake document. So that's kind of the top-down approach, and there's a bottom-up approach, which is let's look at the different modules that they are, and then try to come up with specific tests for every operation for every module that exists. And so expanding the text coverage greatly. And so the big news, and probably the most exciting one, is Gregor has been doing over the past few weeks an amazing job. He managed to take all of the changes in the proof of stake document and implement all of that. And so now in the master branch, it's been merged. All the changes between the old AlphaNet and the new AlphaNet, and there were several ones, and they were substantial. They were taking the role snapshots only once in a while, having stakes, which having stakes be deactivated if people didn't stake, having the cutoff points at 5 cycle, all of these things are in, plus storage cost payments for smart contracts. All of that is in. So that was a huge piece of work, and that's been mentioned to master. So I'm super excited about that. When I made a list a few weeks ago describing, hey, these are the things that I think from a technical standpoint are important to get in before seeing a live network, and that was, I think, the major piece. The one that are missing still is finalizing the work on gas. So the gas cost of deserializing structure in Michelson, and probably changing the call structure of Michelson, because changing it down the line would be pretty annoying. It would be annoying to try to have to basically support an old calling method in the future just because there's a few smart contracts which use that rather than using the better calling methods that we came up with. So that's all for today. As you've noticed now, there's a zero net that it doesn't replace the AlphaNet. The AlphaNet is still running. The AlphaNet is meant to be more stable and change rarely, whereas the zero net is rebooted very often but tracks the master branch. And a lot of folks have found it more exciting to be on the neural net because there's more features and it's closer to what the network intends to be. All right, I'll be back next week with more updates. In the meantime, join the zero net, join the Riot channel, and connect to Tezos, and let us know if you have any issues or any ideas. Thank you.